Welcome to the Registry Insider. I'm Bill Seifarth, CEO and Executive Director of the National Registry of EMTs. And today we're going to be talking about evidence-based guidelines in EMS, in particular what the National Registry of EMTs has to do with the EBGs and their incorporation, certainly within our testing, within recertification and continuing competency, as well as within education. Joining me in today's conversation are Dr. Scott Gilmore. He's the chair-elect of our board of directors, and Dr. Paul Rosenberger. He oversees our content team here at the National Registry of EMTs. So I'd like to start, first of all, gentlemen, thank you for joining for the conversation. And Dr. Gilmore, I'd like to start with you. From a medical perspective, what are evidence-based guidelines and what role are they playing as a profession in EMS?
So to begin with, evidence-based guidelines are things that you should do to provide the best care possible for your patient. It leads to better outcomes, either in mortality or morbidity, so that these people have a better recovery after whatever the incident is. And the role that they're playing, obviously, is they're widely adopted by all medical specialties, whether it's nursing, whether it's physicians. And unfortunately, EMS is a little bit slower to the game. And fortunately, though, there is the group, the Pre-Hospital Guideline Consortium, that is helping to bring this to the forefront of what EMS needs to focus on to provide better patient care.
Good. So you mentioned Pre-Hospital Guidelines Consortium. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? And then Paul, I want to hear from you how we at the National Registry are incorporating EBGs into our world.
So the Pre-Hospital Guidelines Consortium is a group of organizations that have a stake in this, whether it is the physicians, whether it is the employers, whether it is the providers themselves. And what they do is they get together and they look at all the guidelines that are out there and they go through and they grade them, because like everything that's in print, not everything is of the same quality. So they try to find the ones that are most important and have the highest quality behind them so that they have the largest impact. And based off of that, they developed the reading list and the systematic reviews, and they publish that on their website.
Good. And educators are encouraged to go to that website, which we'll put the link in the comment in the section below. But prehospitalguidelines.org is the website for the Pre-Hospital Guidelines Consortium. Now, Paul, to you, where and how are we at the National Registry incorporating evidence-based guidelines into what we do as a certification organization?
Yeah, so we have several goals when we write our examinations. So we, first of all, want them to be clinically accurate. And so with the EBGs that are published through the Pre-Hospital Guidelines Consortium, they help us identify the most up-to-date, the very best evidence so that our examinations are clinically accurate, which also translates into validity and reliability. And so with these guidelines, when a candidate is prepared in their educational institution, then they're able to have the latest information so that they're taught and tested on the same piece of information, the same evidence.
So in essence, this is another opportunity for us to have some content validity for the examinations, which is relevant and it's proven through science. And right. In addition to the other sources. Now, are we at the National Registry only going to be referencing evidence-based guidelines on our exam, or are we going to continue with the other sources as well?
We have a table that has a hierarchy of evidence, and it has a list of about 27 different pieces of journal or articles that we can use as evidence to build our examinations. And in that hierarchy, it stratifies the very best evidence, the mid-grade evidence, and then material that's not fit for our examinations. And so that table is super helpful to us as we build tests so that we know who has more authority when it comes to a topic on a test. For instance, if you had a blog, that would not be good enough for the examination, whereas something that's being published typically by the American Heart Association or the evidence-based guidelines from the Pre-Hospital Guidelines Consortium, that's really good evidence, and that's stuff that we'd want to include on our examinations.
So where can educators, candidates, or students, medical directors go to find out this table of authorities, or what is the best reference guide for our exam? Obviously, evidence-based guidelines, I assume, are pretty high there, but where can they go on our website?
Yeah, so the key initiatives.
Okay.
has a lot of information about this project, the EBG project. And honestly, a lot of the specific pieces of evidence that are in the systematic review are reflected in the training materials from 2020 from the American Heart Association. So when you look at the articles that are referenced in the systematic review, 7 of those come from American Heart.
And those systematic review articles, as well as articles in the general evidence-based guidelines they have published, the reading list, I believe is what it's called, all have kind of summaries of what the evidence-based guideline have, as well as takeaway points that educators can use to incorporate within their curricular or their coursework or within continuing education. So they're very useful, have great tools. And the best part is it's free.
Yeah.
So we encourage educators, again, to go to pre-hospital guidelines.
That document that you're referencing has the abstract of the journal article. And then after that, you'll find a summary of the key points from that particular journal article. The systematic review also has links for accessing those journal articles, most of which are free access, public access. So if they want to go on and read those journal articles, then they're absolutely available to them. And of course, I'd always make sure that they would include the medical director in that process, because I, as a paramedic, may need a little bit of help from the physician, Dr. Scott Gilmore, to help me with interpreting some of the science behind some of that.
So from a medical perspective, Scott, and a medical director perspective, what advice would you give educators as they start to incorporate these EBGs into their curricula or their lessons or continuing education as a system medical director yourself?
Well, I mean, obviously these are very important, and there is the implementation guide on the website, which is very helpful for educators as well as for medical directors on how to implement these through continuing education, as well as to place them in the protocols themselves. So a lot of that, the how-to, the nuts and bolts, is already out there, and it's something that does allow for the medical director and the educator to have a easy way of implementing these. What else is interesting, though, and we've talked about this, you kind of alluded to this with the evidence-based guidelines being in the initial education.
Good transition.
However, we're also looking at using it in our continuing competency project as well, and looking at, how can we incorporate these into, Con Ed or continued competency, et cetera. I mean, as you know, right now, nobody likes change. And so fortunately, though, we are slowly implementing these with the ultimate goal, though, of hopefully the community itself as a whole will understand the importance of these and implement them on their own without us leading them to it.
Yeah, and there's, with the resources that I referenced earlier that the Pre-Hospital Guidelines Consortium offers, educators can incorporate them and develop continuing education. There can be a whole variety of learning activities that can take place to get these evidence-based guidelines in the hands and minds of pre-hospital clinicians that are out there functioning now.
Yeah, very much so.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you both for joining me as we talked about evidence-based guidelines and their important role that they're playing within EMS, and particularly within the National Registry of EMTs for our initial examinations as well as for continued competency. Great opportunities, great advancement for the profession. Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you wouldn't mind, please click the like and subscribe buttons, as well as the notifications so you can get notifications of upcoming episodes. Also, for the latest and greatest happenings of the National Registry, feel free to go to nrmt.org. Thank you very much. And again, stay safe.